replaying the old Newsmaker shows. That's what we're doing this week. We're doing it next week, too. Here's another interesting one. This is from June 1st, 1984. And Kevin Stocking here with Alfred University Professor Dr. Savo Jevremovic.
Now, President Reagan in about 20 minutes will be boarding a jet, Savo, and heading for Ireland. He's going to be greeted in some parts of Ireland, apparently, by demonstrators. They're going to be demonstrating against him. Demonstrations will be, in some cases, by sisters, Catholic sisters, some of whom subscribe to a Marxist philosophy known as liberation theology. And when you look at all this happening, you say, whatever happened to the people who wore black hats and white hats so we could tell who was who? It really is confusing today, isn't it?
It most certainly is, but I don't think they are really demonstrating against Reagan for, let's say, his anti-abortion views, something like that.
No, it wasn't that. I'm just saying they should have a great deal in common. Instead, here they are, some of them at least, going to be protesting.
But I think the one thing they see about him is essentially his very firm stand versus the Soviet Union, and of course the placement of the missiles in Europe. And what makes me very, very nervous is that more and more of the West Europeans, are essentially coming to a point where they, share this philosophy, better red than dead, basically afraid that we might provoke the Soviet Union, World War III might start, and of course they see their own homelands as the next battlefield, or at least next target for nuclear weapons.
That's really it, isn't it? Better red than dead. They really have gotten to the point now where they figure, well, the Russians are coming. The question is, are we going to try to stop them? And if we do, we're liable to lose our lives in the process. That's really what it's down to, isn't it?
Well, especially take a look at West Germany. I mean, here's a country that, if you ask yourself, who are the West Germans? Well, half of them are essentially refugees from East Germany. I mean, these are the people who decided they don't want to live in a communist country, and at great risk to their own personal safety and lives have crossed the walls and went through barbed wires, minefields, and what have you, to get into West Germany, to live in a capitalist society. And now we see it is in that country where that movement appears to be very, very strong.
Is it very strong, or is it because a small group can make a lot of noise?
Probably you're right. I mean, there's no doubt.
I don't know if I'm right. I'm asking.
Well, I think you are, because we've seen the last election, and let's say that one political party, the so-called Greens, a group that combines essentially a pacifist stand with a environmental protection stand, did not receive that many votes. So there aren't really that many, but you most certainly hear about him.
Well, the same thing will happen in Ireland. If there are any demonstrations against Reagan in the next 4 days, we'll certainly read about and see that on television. On the other hand, the millions who go out and cheer him, that'll be sort of expected. So I suppose the minorities always will have the ability to make a lot more noise if they're organized.
Well, organized groups of any sort always make more noise. There's no doubt about that. Now, the different leftist groups have been well, I guess at first willing to go out into the streets and demonstrate and clash with police forces, assume a certain amount of risks, and so on. The others, right, who, do not share these views, are not willing to do that.
Whittaker Chambers, who recently was given posthumously the American Freedom Medal, once said that when he switched from being a communist to a non-communist, that he was going from the winning to the losing side. This was back in the 30s. Do you think that you are on the losing side, Savo?
Well, I most certainly don't like to think that way, but every so often that thought does go through my mind. I really see the, let's say, shall I in quotes, communist-affiliated groups in many parts of the world, especially Central America, South America, most African countries, and quite a few Asian countries, are succeeding in attracting enough attention and enough support, and somehow the other side has very little to offer them. I mean, it's not giving you an alternative. It's not even trying to give them an alternative. That is what bothers me.
Well, Savo, that would all make a lot of sense, I suppose, except for one thing: the boat people and the Berlin Wall and the murder of about half of all the people who live in Cambodia. When the communists take over, two things always, there are no exceptions. there's a mass exodus from the country, and those who are left, many of them are murdered, many are imprisoned as they try to establish order. Why would people actively go out and try to bring that kind of a system onto themselves?
Well, that's a question that really has been perplexing me for many, many years, I can assure you.
Why do they do it? I don't comprehend it.
Well, my feeling is that usually, the communist groups succeed in countries where there are serious problems. And it's an environment where people just want a change. And I don't think they're very rational. Basically, what they're looking for is to essentially destroy what exists. And do not ask the question, really, how are we going to replace it? With what are we going to replace it? Their basic question is, how are we going to destroy it? In other words, I see a negative approach there, and there's a lack of a positive solution. Now, of course, the communists they know what they want to put in once they get into power. They know what they're going to substitute for the previous regime's economic and social systems. But most of the other people who wind up supporting them and all that are primarily opposed to what exists and are essentially willing to just destroy it.
Replace it with anything. In our own country, many of the people who are have been traditionally agents of communism, either by the fact that they've been traitors or because they've offered sympathy to the communists. They very often come from the upper classes or the well-educated classes, and therefore, by the nature of our economic system, because they are well-educated, generally well-paid. And they seem to be the ones who would have the most to lose if communism took over. Well, how do you account for that again?
Well, this is another fact. It's true. It's true not just, it's true in all of the Western countries, right? Western Europe as well in North America. And again, I think what it is these are the people who have plenty of leisure time, who have time to sit and essentially look at what's wrong with the society they live in. And let's face it, you can always find something wrong with any society anywhere in the world, and start formulating some, ideas about replacing with some sort of utopia. But then eventually they get to a point and realize that who has, the means, who's willing to do something about replacing the existing system with something, and then you turn to essentially the communists.
Okay, again, though, I hate to keep coming back to the same thing, but even a casual reading of history, for example, if you're down in a classroom in Nicaragua, you may be a communist today, but certainly if you read any textbooks at all, or even bothered to pick up a magazine from time to time, you would know that wherever they move in, things get worse economically.
Well, you probably could figure it out even without reading history, asking yourself simply the question as to, all right, now supposing we expropriate all those who have some means, right, as Marx put it, take away all the means of production or capital from the private owners, and then divide it among whatever the number of millions of people they have, they can realize that really the improvement in their material welfare, in their standard of living and so on, cannot possibly be very great. I mean, you can sit down and figure that out. But most people really don't approach it in a very rational way. They're just mad that somebody has more than they have. They see themselves living in that misery and somebody else living in luxury, and it upsets them.
So they're willing to give up whatever they've got in order to make sure the other fellow gives up what he's got.
Yes.
Now, I do find it rather perplexing that people would willingly embrace that kind of a system, which I think has been demonstrated does not work economically, politically is extremely difficult to live in. You wonder why they do it.
Well, I mean, you take a look at the Soviet Union right now has very, very serious economic problems. There is no doubt about that. We know that the previous president talked about it. The President Chernenko doesn't talk about it too much. He's not willing, I guess, to undertake major reforms. But there's no doubt that the Soviet economy is being stretched to its utmost limits.
Savo Jevremovic is our guest this morning. It's 10 minutes before 9. We'll be right back.
An interesting conversation from the height of the Cold War, June 1st, 1984. It was when that show was broadcast here on AM 1480 Wlea. Stay with us.
From the Fox Sports Studios in Los Angeles, Here's Eddie Garcia.
In NBA games of note, the Trailblazers get by the Warriors 110-109 in overtime in Oakland, thanks to Damian Lillard. He hit a game-winning three-pointer with 6.3 seconds to play as Portland snaps a 13-game road losing streak to Golden State. The Kings stunned the Lakers 117-116 thanks to Bogdan Bogdanovic's three-pointer at the buzzer. Sacramento with the win. Lakers star LeBron James did not play in this game due to a groin injury. He's going to be out for several weeks. Rockets over the Celtics 127-113. James Harden goes for 45 points for Houston as they've won 8 of their last 9. And the 76ers beat the Jazz in Utah 114-97. College football bowl action in the Texas Bowl. Baylor outscores Vanderbilt 45-38. In the Pinstripe Bowl, Wisconsin rolls over Miami 35-3. And in the Independence Bowl, it was Duke behind quarterback Daniel Jones' 6 touchdowns, 5 passing, 1 rushing, beating Temple 56-27.
From the Fox Business Network, stocks looking to open higher on Wall Street on this final trading day of a turbulent week. Wall Street's late session turnaround yesterday had the Dow finishing up 260 points after being down more than 600 points earlier. Most Asian stock markets gaining today, but Japan's Nikkei edging lower. JCPenney now a penny stock. The struggling retailer closing below $1 for the first time to 97 cents a share. The National Association of Realtors releasing its pending home sales index for November today. The association blasting the decision by FEMA to rule that the National Flood Insurance Program cannot be renewed during the partial government shutdown, which kicked in on Saturday. The association estimating that decision could disrupt up to 40,000 home sales each month. With the Fox Business Report, I'm Lillian Wu.
Imagining a better bank starts with looking at the savings rates most banks offer and saying, really? Capital One is building something better. You can open a Capital One savings account with one of the nation's best savings rates from anywhere, like here, or here, or here. One of the nation's best savings rates. Opened online, at a Capital One location, or from anywhere. That's banking reimagined. What's in your wallet?
For consumers only. Offered by Capital One N.A. member FDIC. Copyright 2018 Capital One.
The holiday season is a time for friends, family, and community. And at Steuben Trust, we want to encourage everyone to support our local businesses and remember to think, shop, and buy local. Steuben Trust has served our communities for over 100 years, and we will continue to focus our efforts on helping local families, businesses, and farms grow and prosper in the new year. From all of us at Steuben Trust Company, best wishes for a healthy and happy holiday season.
I'm so frustrated with my current internet speeds.
Then it's the perfect time to make the switch and get the gift of speed this holiday season.
What do you mean, make the switch?
When you switch to Empire Access, get a $100 credit. It's the fastest internet in town with speeds of 100 meg down and 20 up. And when you bundle with digital TV, it's only $65 a month. They even offer gigabit service if you need more speed.
Sounds like what I need for my surfing, streaming, and gaming. How do I reach them?
Simple. Jump online to EmpireAccess.com, but remember to get the $100 credit, make the switch by December 31st.
Want your vehicle looking just like it did when you drove it out of the dealership? Then stop by RBS Auto Detailing on Canisteo and Pine Streets in Hornell. RBS Auto Detailing. The before and after photos of your vehicle won't come close to showing the great job they'll do for you. Cleaning, washing, and waxing. They can get your vehicle looking nice and new both inside and out. RBS Auto Detailing on the corner of Canisteo and Pine Streets in Hornell.
Savo, let's talk about the economics in Europe, economic problems there. The president is going there also to London, not just Ireland. He's going to London, and his purpose there will be to have an economic summit. That's now becoming something of an annual affair. In reading about the president's trip, I noticed that many of those European countries have really astronomical unemployment levels. Example, Ireland, 20% unemployed, and it's been that way for several years. Is Europe economically in tough straits right now?
Yes, it definitely is. And you put the finger on the major problem, that is unemployment. When you look at countries like, let's say, France with about 10%, Italy about roughly the same percentage, and then you take a look at what they've had historically, See, we here in the United States are used to something like, let's say, right now we're not complaining and we have something close to 8%. 6-7% is absolutely not a problem for us. But you're looking at countries where unemployment rates used to be, until a few years ago, not a few years, I mean just about 3-4 years ago, something in the order of maybe 2% or less. And they're hit with the, what to them are astronomical figures. And apparently they're not finding a solution as yet.
They tend to blame us, don't they?
Well, sure. They blame the United States. They're blaming basically the very high rates of interest in the United States, which are attracting European capital to this country and therefore leaving less money over there for them to invest. I would probably agree partially that this is one of the factors, but I think there are many, many other factors which are just as important.
Well, when inflation was out of control a few years ago when Carter was president, they blamed him and the inflation rate, too, did they not?
Well, they have blamed the United States basically ever since essentially, I would say, the late 50s or early 60s.
Whether we've got high or low interest rates, we'll get blamed.
That's right. We were blamed, as you said before, because we let simply the dollar go all the way down, and in that way American goods translated into prices in German marks, French francs, and so on were extremely low, and they wanted us to do something about strengthening the dollar. So once when they took those measures, raised the interest rates, cut our inflation down, they're blaming us again for that too.
Are they justified in that anger toward the United States?
Well, I would say that I probably could find just as many people in the United States who would argue that these high rates of interest are harming us as well, not just the Europeans. So we could, explain why they are not in the best interest of either the American economy or most of the European economies, or even, let's say, all the other countries in the world which have borrowed money here in the United States now have difficulty repaying: Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, and so on. But what they are facing essentially is simply the rate of growth is slowing down. It's slowing down because, well, in France, for instance, I think the political system, the socialist government, having imposed a number of measures like shortening work weeks, increasing compulsory vacation periods, and nationalizing, of course, a number of industries, has definitely created let's say, an anti-business type of atmosphere, which is not very conducive to additional investments and therefore the expansion of the economy. I think something like this is far more important than the American level of interest rates.
So your answer to my question is that while they do have some justification in blaming us, they ought to look to themselves, too.
Sure.
Are you familiar with the problems in Ireland? I'm very curious how they got to 20% unemployment.
I don't know. I don't know that much. But this is, it's an unbelievably high rate, yes.
And apparently it's been there for a long time, along with, this is the thing that I find mind-boggling, along with a 17 and 18% inflation rate. Yeah. Well, if you combine those two things, how does a country keep going?
Let's say Brazil, to take an example, had that problem for years and years, or decades, I should say now. And they're using a system called indexation. In other words, what it is, it's it's a law that they passed, which allows and actually compels each and every contract has to be brought up to to the level of inflation. In other words, your salary automatically goes up by 10% if that month prices increase by 10%. Your debts increase by that amount, you see. As well.
So if I owed the bank for my home, say $20,000, they would up at 10%.
That's
everything.
Right.
Well, then you really are staying the same. Everyone's just moving right up.
Well, okay. In theory, that was the whole idea. But actually, what they found out is that it just didn't work quite like that. Despite how you wrote the law and all that, certain elements in the society did not quite fare as well as others did. Essentially, people with wages did not, in Brazil, for instance, I have many studies there, they did not move up as some others did.
So somebody still is going to get...
Yeah, somebody is
going to be left out.
Sure.
But the idea itself, would you think is a sound concept?
Well, Milton Friedman, an American economist, right, a rather very conservative economist, has been recommending that for the United States. So if we cannot control inflation, let's go to the indexation system, and that way we can, to a great extent at least, equalize the burden, if you want, or rather eliminate it for everybody and not just certain
But now that
sectors.
inflation is down to an acceptable level, that idea is being dropped.
Well, the inflation right now is running at the rate that compelled Richard Nixon back in August of 1971 to impose a price and wage freeze for 90 days and then continue with price and wage controls, if you remember.
5%?
It was, I think, not quite 5, it was around 4.5 or thereabouts. We were worried, so it shows you how we change our mind.
One of the more humorous things I've read in recent days was a Kennedy statement of 1960 saying that President Eisenhower had allowed this country to run an inflation rate of 0.5% was unacceptable.
Well,
we would all welcome that, wouldn't we?
We most certainly would. Well, as a matter of fact, we're welcoming right now the rate that Nixon felt was excessive, and something drastic had to be done. There was a Republican president interfering with our market economy, our free enterprise economy.
Savo, we have about a minute left. Let me ask you to make your predictions of things to come. What do you predict for the nation's economy in this election year?
Well, please, we don't have another year left. It's only about let's say roughly half a year left. And I really don't foresee that much of a change in the next 6 months. However, right after the election, I most certainly would expect interest rates to rise substantially. On the other hand, because they probably will be kept somewhat down, I think the Federal Reserve will loosen this monetary policy and inflationary rate will increase. We probably will go definitely, close to 6% or thereabouts.
But again, that's not terrible anymore.
Compared to Brazil, no, it's not.
Or even a few years ago in this country.
Compared to also a few years ago, no. Compared to a few years before that, yes, it's high.
Savo, thank you very much for being with us. Our guest again, Dr. Savo Jevremovic, Chairman of the Economics Department, Alfred University. Stay tuned for news coming up next, then The Beth Moore Show here on WLEA.
So from June 1st, 1984, Dr. Savo Jevremovic. Very interesting show. I'm Brian O'Neill. Stay with us. We've got a current events newsmaker with Dr. Robert Heinemann coming up shortly.